Hey guys, Andrew from Dice Commando here. So we're going to do something a little different today, deviating from the live play, and instead I wanted to talk about my drafts from this weekend. So I was able to go to 3 drafts this weekend, an 11 person on the release day, an 8 person on Friday night, and another 8 person on Saturday. And I wanted to kind of spend some time talking about the non-dice cards that I thought were good or bad in draft, or at least the ones that didn't meet my expectations. Obviously, I'm sure like most of you, you went in with thinking something was going to be good or it wasn't. And what I ended up finding was when I was sorting my cards last night, I had a whole bunch of certain cards that I kept gravitating towards, and I may not even have noticed that at the time. So I wanted to comment on those. So the first one, I have to mention this just because it's so obvious, right, is No Allegiance. This card has been talked to death on basically everything in the boards as well. But the card says include only if you have no hero or villain characters on your team. In other words, you have an all-neutral team. Each of your neutral characters has +1 health. So this card obviously is insanely good in draft because for a couple of reasons. First off, obviously it lets you play all 3 draft characters. So if you open this up, you don't need to draft characters anymore. Like you can just take it, you just give your dice, just say I'm not going to take a dice card out of this set of 3, and you take it, but it's okay because now you don't need to draft characters and you can focus entirely on dice. It gives a pretty good distinct advantage. That doesn't mean it's broken, it doesn't mean it's an auto win, but it's very strong in draft. So I had to speak to that, but this is not, I'm not counting this one. This one's kind of a no-brainer. The first one that I was really impressed with this weekend that I didn't expect was Theed Royal Palace. The power action on this battlefield is gain 1 resource, spot a neutral character to gain or to take 1 additional action. So obviously you have to control the battlefield to be able to use the power action. But how many times in draft do you not have a neutral character on your team? The answer is very rarely. So the other thing in draft is money's hard to get, and a lot of the upgrades, especially the ones that come in the draft kit, are 3 cost. If you can get this battlefield, it is well worth the 2 shields to give your opponent to be able to drop a 3-drop on turn 1. So this card is really fantastic. I think it's also going to see a lot of playing constructed with Han. But if you draft this card, it may be better than taking a specific dice card. Next is You Are My Friend. So this is a common. It's a 1-cost blue neutral event. Turn a character die to any side. If you have more blue cards in play than an opponent, you may remove that die. I ended up with at least 9 or 10 of these at the end of the draft weekend. Just the versatility of this card really impressed me. So first off, you can turn a character die to any side. That can be yours or your opponent's. On Thursday, I was lucky enough to get Barriss, and I was able to use this to flip Anakin and then flip Barriss, and that hurt a lot of people bad. The second part, I think, is really just more of a bonus. If you have more blue cards in play than an opponent, you may remove that die. So obviously this is somewhat of a conditional removal. But the fact that you can use this to flip your own die or use it as removal, I think makes this card really, really powerful. Next is Inflame. So this is a 0-cost red with Ambush. Turn an opponent's die to a side showing damage. So again, one of the problems that exists in draft is the fact that money's pretty sparse, and a lot of the characters do have pay sides or they have modified sides. So this is kind of a soft removal. The ambush is also nice just because it helps you keep tempo. But flipping Anakin from his 2 to his 2 for 1, or flipping someone to a modifier side is pretty good. So this card ended up being very useful all through draft. Next card is Systems Gauge. So this one's a little more conditional in that you have to obviously have it on a vehicle, which means you have to get the vehicle out first. But let's be very clear, this card wins games. So obviously when you roll it in, you can just pay 1. It's just guaranteed removal. Not only did this hurt when I had it played against me and when I was playing it against people, but also, when you get done with your game and you're walking around looking at other people's playing, I can't tell you how many games I saw where it was a very close game that as soon as you saw it, you knew the game was over because all certain people had to do was activate a vehicle and they could take a die away. And they could take that critical die away. It's a very, very powerful card. If you can draft this card and, of course, have a vehicle to pair with it, like your Fang Fighter, I think you go for this card. All right, next one is an Imposing Presence. So I'll admit, when I first read this, I was like, eh. But in reality, in practice, when you're actually playing, it's pretty common that your opponent only has 3 cards in their hand. So to be clear, it is very rare that you're going to be able to remove 2 dice. It's very rare they're not going to have any in hand and have the dice that you want to remove on the table. But the fact that you can remove an opponent's die if they have 3 fewer in their hand, which I think is not that uncommon, I think is pretty good for 1. And if the fringe case happens where they have no cards in hand, you can remove 2 die. So those are the top 5 non-dice cards for draft. Next, I want to talk about quickly some cards that I thought were going to be good, or when I first read them, I thought were going to be really good, and ended up not panning out for me the way that I thought they would. So the first one is At Odds. So this is a 1-cost blue neutral. Remove a die showing a value that is an odd number. You may place this event on the bottom of your deck. So I know when I first read this, I was like, wow, that's fantastic. I can remove a die and put this on the bottom of my deck. Removal is hard to find as it is. The fact that you can recycle it. Sure, in draft, very rarely you get your bottom of your deck without losing. I'll grant you that. But the fact that it does that is pretty nice. However, what I found in draft was because the dice are a little more inconsistent, it was pretty rare that you actually had odd numbers out there that you wanted to remove. Aside from like the Fang 3 or something like that, a lot of the dice out there end up being either blanks, specials, or 2s. This one, to be honest, it kind of feels bad to use it to remove a 1 melee. Like, you certainly can do that if it's going to affect a modifier or something like that. But I just found that this ended up not getting used and sitting in my hand. So I think this card might be a trap. Next is Improvised Defense. So to be clear, I don't think this card is bad. But again, it's one of those cards that kind of just sat in my hand, and I could never really get it onto the table and use it. So the decks that had focus, so a lot of the people would choose high focus characters and then run vehicles and mods. And getting this down sure can remove 1 die, but a lot of the times that was going to be just throwing a bug at a windshield. And I found that I couldn't always have the money available to put this down just in case somebody else had a random focus. So again, it's a very good card, it's very useful, but I just found over the weekend in draft that the 1 or 2 that I was able to draft ended up being discarded for rerolls versus hitting the table. Alright, this third card is Laser Cannon. I openly admit I thought this card was going to be super good in draft. Just rotate or just roll in your vehicle and do an indirect. It just didn't seem to pan out, right? By the time you get your vehicle on the table, maybe you've got a mod on them, you're rolling in some pretty hefty dice, and from an in-game standpoint, the Laser Cannon just didn't really seem to do the work. I will grant you again that damage is damage, but for the 1 cost, I think there were just better cards to be played. Now, it is a common, you may just end up with it and throw it in, and that's fine. But I think you're going to end up using it as a pitch to reroll, because that 1 to 2 indirect that you're going to do by the time you get everything set up and rolling is just going to be a drop in the bucket. Alright, so this last one I expect to take a little flack for. Aerial Advantage. I think Aerial Advantage is a huge trap. So the card itself, I'll read it. Play only if you control the battlefield. Spot a red character to turn a die to any side. You may spot a vehicle to remove a die. You may spot a mod to turn a die to any side or remove a die. So it's a red hero for 1. That card is huge if you can meet all those conditions. The reason I think this is a trap, though, is you do have to have the battlefield. You have to be able to spot a red character to take advantage of the first spot. And obviously you're not running this if you're not doing vehicles and mods, so let's go ahead and assume that you trigger those last 2. But still, by the time that I was able to get this in my hand and I had everything rolling, I think it was only 1 or 2 games maybe where I was actually able to use this. So I think in Constructed, when you can set your deck up for this, obviously this card is going to be pretty phenomenal. But in draft, I just ended up seeing it not really materialize for me. So that's it. That's all I had to comment on. Obviously, leave your thoughts in the comments. Tell me where I'm wrong, where I'm right, and why I'm an idiot. But I hope to see you guys back later. We'll be back tonight with some more videos. We're going to Super Play for our Progressive League start. Talk to you guys later.